Hey there, it's Camille on the coast, and I am at the beach. I'm at the beach, but I'm not in the water. I found a rock formation, and I made a seat out of it, and I've got my iced coffee. Again, don't sleep on the Burger King iced coffee. I don't know what's in it. I mean, coffee and mocha, I don't know. Who cares? It's good. I don't have it very often. I think it was like, for the large, $3 something. $3.29 or $3.79 or whatever. But it's perfect for Sunday. Bill is still at a sleepover. So it's perfect to just let me go grab an iced coffee from Burger King and then walk down to the beach, because that's what you do. So I took a book with me. If you can see it, Natalie Babbitt's The Search for Delicious. Natalie Babbitt also wrote Tuck Everlasting. I admit I have not read Tuck we have it, but I have not read it, nor have I seen the movies, so I don't know. Anyhow, this book, I want to read the prologue. The prologue, The Search for Delicious. There was a time, once, when the earth was still very young, a time some call the oldest days. This was long before there were any people about to dig parts of it up and cut parts of it off. People came along much later, building their towns and castles, which nearly always fell down after a while, and plaguing each other with quarrels and supper parties. The creatures who lived on the earth in that early time stayed each in his own place and kept it beautiful. There were dwarves in the mountains, wool dwellers in the forests, mermaids in the lakes, and, of course, winds in the air. There was one particular spot on the earth where a ring of mountains enclosed a very dry and dusty place. There were winds and dwarfs there, but no mermaids, because there weren't any lakes, and there were no wool dwellers either, because forests couldn't grow in so dry a place. Then a remarkable thing happened. Up in the mountains one day, a dwarf was poking about with a sharp tool, looking for a good spot to begin mining. He poked and poked until he had made a very deep hole in the earth. He hurried in great excitement to tell the other dwarfs, and they all came running to see the water. They were so pleased with it that they built over it a fine house of heavy stones, and they made a special door out of a flat rock and balanced it in its place very carefully on carved hinges. Then one of them made a whistle out of a small stone, which blew a certain very high note tuned to just the right warble, so that when you blew it, the door of the rock house would open, and when you blew it again, the door would shut. They took turns being in charge of the whistle, and they worked hard to keep the spring clean and beautiful. But the spring they had discovered was in a cup of land surrounded by cliffs, and eventually the spring began to fill up the cup, until, after a while, there was a little lake there, with the top of the spring house standing out in the center like an island. And the lake kept getting higher and higher. After a few years, the spring house was completely submerged, and the dwarfs could no longer get down to it, although they could see it easily through the clear water, and could still make the door open and close with the whistle, just the same as before. The water in the lake began in time to fill up with creatures of its own, as water has a way of doing. And one of these creatures was a lovely little mermaid. The dwarfs named her Artis, and one of them made her a pretty doll out of linked stones with a trailing fern fastened to its head for hair. Artis loved the doll very much and played with it all the time, and in exchange, she promised to keep watch over the spring in the House of Rocks, now far down under the water. So the dwarfs gave her the special whistle, and she kept it hanging by a chain on a sharp bit of rock at the water's edge. Every morning she would blow the whistle to open the door, and then she would dive down and play with her doll inside among the bubbles. At night she would come up and blow the whistle again to close the door and swim away to sleep. While all this was happening, the water in the lake had risen so high that it began to spill over in one spot where there was a V-shaped gap in the cliffs, and it tumbled down into the dry and dusty place ringed by the mountains. It fingered itself into a great many streams and watered the land so well that everything was soon green and fresh. Forests sprang up, and wool dwellers came there to watch over the trees. And then, later, the people began to arrive. They built towns, and they crowned a king, and they enjoyed a great many quarrels and troubles, all of which they created quite by themselves. The dwarfs withdrew deep under the mountains where they wouldn't have to watch, and they went on mining and almost never came out. In time, they separated into groups of 2 or 3, each group mining where it chose, and they never lived all together again. The wool dwellers, who were admired by the people for their knowledge, stayed in their trees and came down to answer questions from time to time. But after a while, they grew irritated by the foolishness of these questions and wouldn't always answer. Eventually, the people stopped coming to ask. And something very sad happened to Artis. One day, when she was in the spring house playing with her doll, she heard a new and pleasing kind of sound. She put down the doll and swam up to the top of the lake. There on the bank sat a man, the first she had ever seen, making pretty music on a round box with strings pulled tight across it. Artis stayed to listen, hiding behind a water lily, with only her eyes and ears out of the water. After a while, the man put the round box aside and, leaning over to drink from the lake, noticed the whistle hanging from its sharp bit of rock. He picked it up and blew through it, but he was only a man and couldn't hear the sound it made. As Artis watched in dismay, he started to toss it away, paused, looked at it again, and finally hung it around his neck. Then he picked up his strange instrument and wandered off. She cried to him to come back, but he didn't hear. Artis dove, trembling, to the spring house, but the blast the man had blown on the whistle had made the door swing shut. The house was locked. Artis could peer through the cracks between the rocks and see her doll lying inside, but there was no way to get it out. After that, she was sad all the time. At night, she would swim up to the spot where the whistle had hung and weep for hours. Someone heard her once and made a song about her, but no one could help her, for the dwarfs were far away. And in the meantime, in the land below, towns were built and burned and built again, and kings and their people lived and died and enjoyed their troubles for years and years and years. Artis and the dwarfs and the wool dwellers were largely forgotten except in stories and songs. Nobody believed they were real anymore, except for an occasional child, or an even more occasional worker of evil, these being the only ones with imagination enough to admit to the possibility of something even more amazing in the world than those commonplace marvels which it spreads so carelessly before us every day. So that is the prologue for Natalie Babbitt's The Search for Delicious. And I have read more than that. I mean, I'm not very far from that because I only started the book on Wednesday. And then I didn't pick it up again until right this second. But I wanted to read that. This book is still in print, but it's a different cover, because this is a cover from like 1900 and, let me see, 1969. So I'm just saying that. But yeah, it's a good book. So, but there are details in the prologue that I'm sure everything goes back to the prologue. So I looked this book up. This looks like, let me see now, over 165 pages. And it's supposed to be for the 8 to 12 year olds. I mean, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I was reading at 5. And by 8, 3rd grade, I was really indulging in the spelling words, make a sentence with these words. So anything spelling, vocabulary, make a sentence, make a story. So I was a really good, avid reader, because survival, you know. Belle is not a reader. Belle is not a reader. She is an emerging reader. She is learning reading. But she's also got, you know, communications and processing is an issue that's on paper. But it's also survival. Like, I was an avid reader and writer, but it was also survival. You know, that's how I got through my early childhood traumas and such. And what I couldn't do, I mean, my grandmother loved me, you know that, we all know. Anybody who remembers me, who went to school with me in the 80s and 90s, my grandmother loved me, and vice versa. But it was complicated. Limited by this little apartment and that little beige Plymouth Duster that sometimes I would have to get out and run in the street to grab pieces of the car. Oh my. Woo, I don't know how we survived that, but we did it. But my escape was reading books. You know, the library books, and also the little troll books, or scholastic, whatever. So this is a scholastic book. So those little book sheets, and you got books. That was my survival. All the stuff that I could not experience hands-on in person, I could experience in a book, reading in a book, watching on a TV, or ultimately by conceptualizing a story, a poem, and getting that onto paper. That's why I became a creative writing major, got my degree in English creative writing. So Belle, bless her, does not need that escape through reading and writing. But it would be beautiful for her to master reading, master writing. And that's it, you know, for self-sufficiency. And I am noticing tremendous growth in that child. And I think getting her a phone, giving her access, you know, letting her play Roblox or Dress to Impress with her friends. Everybody's in their own house, on a tablet, on a phone, and they play games together. You know, they screen share. She's really picking up like vocabulary, and really picking up, like, she's becoming self-sufficient. I feel, by interacting and engaging with her peers from like 7 to 13, all the kids who dial in and they play games online together, and she's learning how to participate and be competitive and, follow cues and commands and all that stuff. But we've got a lot of books. Grab a book and sit and read herself. I pray that's coming, because there's a lot of books. Like, I'm a dirty little book hoarder. Guilty as charged. That's always been me. Even though, like, I'm not just sitting and reading. But I'm coming back to it, Yeah. So that's just where I am. But yeah, The Search for Delicious is a great book. So go grab this. Don't sleep on this book. Even if you want to buy this, I saw it on Amazon, paperback, I don't know, $5 or something. But read a book. Like, you don't have to be a child to read this book, because it's pretty dense. So I'm like, ooh, the comprehension level of an 8, 9, 10-year-old, I don't know. Could your average 8-year-old read, like, sit down? And I know kids can do, amazing things. Some others are just barely, some 8-year-olds cannot read at all. And that's okay. We're all on our journey. So, but anybody can read this, and I'm enjoying this at 48 years old. So, I read children's books probably because my inner child, first and foremost. But number 2, I am a writer. I am a reader. I am a writer. And I may want to, pretty much I am studying children's books so that maybe I can write a story. So I'm like, how do you write a book that is appropriate for the 8 to 12-year-olds? Like, what language are you using? That's very important to me. What language are you using? How are you structuring the story? All those things. So, yeah, this is the method to my madness. Will I do this? I don't know. I've been saying since I was 10 years old, I'm writing a book. Well, that's what I mean. I said I'm writing a book. Believe me, I am writing a book. So, yeah, that's all. I'm going to shut up now. And I hope everybody's having a beautiful start of this new week. This new week starts today, Sunday through Saturday. Yeah. Saturday is the 31st. So the 25th is the 31st. Let's go into a good last week of August, the last few beats of the Mercury retrograde. And let's go embrace all the beautiful things.